All right, we're at SSA 2025 in Cincinnati, Ohio. We're here with Chris, who's a philosophy major from Rutgers, drove all the way from Rutgers. And your first SSA.
My very first SSA.
Yeah, that's great. My first one was 2018.
Wow.
So, which is 6 years, is that 7 years ago, right? If I can do the math. I'm a classicist, I said that right, not a mathematician. And so for a Christian, that's a pretty good record.
Yeah, I think so.
Anyway, so what brought you here?
I ended up getting into Rutgers under a social justice program, which is the reason I ended up not going to Colorado instead for school. Okay. And as soon as I got there...
That was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? 'Cause you said
well, I came in as a transfer, actually. I did community college for a few years in Texas. That might have stoked some of my animosity, the religious environment down there. But then I got into the social justice program, and I really started thinking about ways to be more active in, turning my beliefs not into just like little rhetorical things, like little polemical things, which is always fun as a YouTube atheist.
Yes.
For a long time.
That's fun in general.
Yeah.
Especially if you can make some money off of it.
Right. But if you actually want to help people, there's other things you can do. So that I started looking for secular programs specifically, and this is one of the first things that came up. At
Rutgers. And so it's a social justice program that actually touts itself as more secular in some way?
Yeah, the actual minor declaration at the school is called social justice. It's not secularly based at all. That's something I actually I'm starting the chapter organization at Newark this next upcoming semester.
Okay.
So that wasn't a thing before. But it was one of the first things I realized when I got into the program, what do you think is going to happen these next 2 years while you're here, where we talk about social justice stuff? And it's a very diverse campus. It's one of the most diverse campuses in the world. It's one of their lines. And
I could see that.
I was just I'm interested in the conflict that's going to happen between people's orthodoxy and their faith, and then between the values of the HLLC, which is the name of the program. And that started happening. So I kind of sat back and watched that dynamic unfold.
And then did philosophy philosophy?
Yeah, philosophy. I also major in English. I'm interested in literature.
Right, English, yeah.
Almost all my favorite authors were atheists. So that's just the way I kind of lean. So I viewed all those conflicts playing out on the sideline, having fun with it.
And is there an SSA chapter there, or is it?
There is not. No, I am starting it.
Oh, okay. So did you hear about it recently then?
About the program, SSA? No, I just did independent research.
And discovered it?
Yeah, correct.
Because at some point you're is there not a Campus Crusade thing for atheists? Or what?
Yeah, exactly. We have a really big interfaith program and stuff. Most of it is devoted to people of faith, though, so absolutely nothing of the contrary. And I decided it'd be cool just to get a table out there and let people know.
I'm kind of surprised that SSA wasn't at Rutgers yet, to be honest.
They used to have one. It's been quite a long time.
Of course, yeah. Because anytime you're talking student organizations, it's as successful as students are disciplined.
Yeah, exactly. So it'll be there next year. I don't know about 27.
Yeah, I started a Socratic club with some students some years ago, but no, it did not survive.
Yeah. What do you mean by Socratic club? You mean
Well, C.S. Lewis started what actually was called a Socratic club.
Okay.
Where people came and presented papers on religion. And some were atheists. Antony Flew, famous atheist, gave one of his most famous papers to that Socratic club, and who interestingly, I guess, unconverted, came back to theism, or maybe not came back. I don't know what he grew up with, but yeah. So I was kind of inspired by that idea. But just the idea of Socrates, where you're interested in the truth, wherever the discussion takes you, and it's the thing nice about Socrates is it's metaphysics, but also ethics.
Yeah.
You can't really just separate those easily, which for you will be kind of obvious, but for the average person, sometimes morality runs completely parallel and unrelated to their religious beliefs. Surprise, surprise. So tell me then what you're prior to all that. Were you destined to be an SSA founding? Or were you from a religious family?
Probably not destined, just from pure laziness. And it has nothing to do with my convictions. I guess it does. If you're convicted enough, you'd actually do it.
Yeah, that's good.
I didn't grow up in a religious family at all. My father was raised in a Lutheran church, basically told to I was tired of falling asleep at the pew every day. So as soon as he joined the Navy, he got off. He's kind of done with that. My mother's family, not religious at all. I don't think a single bone. Not because that just wasn't a part of their life at all. It was part of their community.
Where was your mom from and your dad? Where were they from?
He grew up in Iowa, central Iowa, corn farmers, soybeans.
I'm a Minnesotan.
Okay, wonderful. Midwest. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
We're above. We're superior to.
Yes, literally, geographically.
Just to be clear, geographically.
Yeah.
But in any other way.
Well, my mother was from San Diego, and I'd say that's pretty
There's a lot of jokes between Minnesotans and Iowans, which no one's ever heard of unless you're from Minnesota and Iowa. But I have great friends in Iowa. It's basically the same place as Minnesota.
But if we're talking about superior, my mother's from San Diego, and it doesn't get better than that.
So there you go, the pinnacle. Yeah. The Acropolis.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, so totally non-religious background for her, and for him, as soon as he became an adult, he was like, okay, moving on.
Yeah, part of the reason I started getting more interested in these questions too, started getting back into literature after a long time, and I realized there's a lot of philosophical stuff I was missing, and that it would take time to study that, I can't just do a wiki on Immanuel Kant and then you'll understand the whole book. That's not how it works.
Especially with Kant.
Yeah, especially there. And so he kind of just brackets those questions off. It's not a thing of it creates animosity or whatever.
He meaning your dad?
My dad, my father. You ask him about God or something, he goes, I don't touch that realm. Same way people are like, I don't do politics.
Even with you?
Even with me, yeah. I'll ask him, I'll probe him all the time. Just I'm not interested in that. He's like, I just feel what I feel, and that's it. I'm like, all right, but that doesn't help anything between us, and something more constructive has to come.
So you're like his worst nightmare. He left all this, and you come back with philosophy training. That's the worst.
Yeah.
If you haven't noticed, if you didn't remember from your 4 years of reading philosophy, Socrates was killed.
Yeah.
Similar to Jesus in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Did you then, when you were growing up, they're raising you obviously trying to inculcate some value system?
Yeah.
Teach you some basic things about
general family values. I mean, I guess the way most of us get our values now is through public education. You interact with other people. You go to school, a teacher tells you be nice to other kids. It's playtime cleanup. I mean, so that's probably it for the most part, and that's how I assume it works for people who aren't part of or don't have a doctrine of faith in some way, or don't have a kind of orthodoxy. Which for me is part of the reason I became an atheist. I'm like, I didn't need this to become a moral person.
Was your mom? Did your mom have any different kind of developed value system from your dad's because she'd not had a Lutheran background, or were they?
No.
Were they similar?
Not all. They're pretty similar. They're pretty chilled. They like to listen to Sublime. They like to have a few beers by the pool. But I don't think they don't really concern themselves with things like that.
Yeah.
It's just.
Well, I mean, at some point, right? People. Everybody has some views that they're fairly passionate about, and they probably get in discussions with their friends or family or whatever, the ones that they feel they can safely do so with.
Yeah.
And so that might bring out differences or whatever. Certainly, if nothing else, it shows up when they're following politics or the culture wars, which there are plenty.
Right.
So that's why I was asking, did that sort of come out at all in various times?
I don't think they're really ever concerned with that at all. The last few years...
They weren't really political, and they just weren't...
No, not really. And I've come to realize that a lot of people, with religion politics say that they are religious and that they are political, but there's not much reflection on it. So everyone's got opinions, you know what I mean?
Right, yeah. Everybody has opinions, but there's very little reflection probably.
Yeah, actually. Exactly. But that doesn't mean they didn't give me strong moral convictions, or they didn't give me grounds to build my own. And we didn't do a Socratic thing in my house growing up. So if I felt a certain way about something, it wasn't interrogated and we worked through it.
But there must have been times, where you're a teenager and you're thinking, I want to do this.
Yeah.
And your parents are like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you get the, World War III, the rafters begin to shake.
Yeah.
I spent, so my parents were divorced when I was young, and my dad's side was Catholic, and pretty strict Catholic as far as their church attendance world, but not necessarily in terms of the way they lived or reflected on life. My mom's side was more secular. It was Lutheran, but it was very secular and more liberal, and I don't mean politically, just more liberal. And and pretty much after I was like 6, it was rare. We only occasionally would go to church, and more if we were with our dad.
Yeah.
So most of the time I was not thinking at all about religion, and the times I did think about it, I thought it was dumb and hypocritical and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Till I was in university. But I had conflicts with my dad because I was having ideas of my own.
Yeah. That happened a little bit to me, but that would only be political stuff. It wouldn't be anything wider. So it'd be like, maybe we shouldn't go to this country with a bunch of troops. And he'd be like, oh, well, he was in the Navy.
Military. Yeah,
he was
Navy.
military.
So he was more pro-supportive of the conflicts that we were involved in.
Yeah, but kind of blindly. He's starting to reformulate some of his opinions.
So was he more conservative politically as a result of that, or not really?
Yeah, that's changed. And all of our thinking and all of our attitude towards politics and religion started to change as we moved around more. Spent a lot of time on the West Coast, and then we went deep south in Texas, and that was one of the things that really, kind of changed the way we all interacted.
Our meaning you and your parents?
Yes, and our family, yeah.
And by the change, you mean you kids changed? You said you had more than you, or?
Yeah, I have a sister as well.
Okay. But because you said the plural, did you mean your parents and you changed?
Yes, all of us. Yeah, we've all gone through a lot of reflection and changed our opinions about things.
And part of that was because you moved into the South.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, that was a big change. Spent a lot of time in San Diego. Spent some time in rural Nevada. Fallon Air Force Base, which is like the new.
Yep.
This is where Top Gun is now.
Yeah.
And so that was conservative, rural. Everywhere else we've been, if you're in the military, generally that's the way it is.
Yeah,
too.
I was Air Force.
Okay, yeah. So
out of high
just
school.
General kind of conservative attitude. I think a lot of people think they have to be if you're in the military.
Yep.
Because you want benefits, you want your retirements. You can't be going around saying I hate the military every day.
Yeah.
But then we went to the Deep South, and after coming from San Diego, and I think it was very easy to see contrasts. And it wasn't a big culture shock. It's just it takes a few years to see it. I live in a bigger town in Texas, got a university and a community college. But when you start to spend time with the people, you start to see behind the veil a little bit. That's where you really see the differences in the values.
Where was this? What part of Texas?
This is East Texas. This is east of Dallas, Tyler, Texas.
Yeah, I know Tyler. Yeah.
Okay, wow.
I lived in Dallas for a few years.
Oh, great. I've been having a hard time finding anybody who knows the existence of Tyler,
Yeah,
Texas.
Tyler's lovely. It's actually a lovely area.
It is.
The rose gardens.
Yeah, the Rose Gardens. Yeah, you do know. Rose capital of the U.S.
Yeah, very pretty.
But yeah,
also you get into some
Baptist
hills
capital.
and pine trees,
Yeah.
lakes.
Exactly, the start of the...
But it's also, a pretty, I think of that as like close to the buckle.
Yeah, and evangelical is part of the big attitude there. A lot of extreme Baptists, stuff like that.
Yeah. So at that point, you started getting more like, okay, I want to. Is that partly the motivation to try and then like I'm going to reflect on this and learn more?
Yeah, it was. It was. I love polemics and I love contrarians, and so I was just interested in being in opposition. Maybe in a way just to find some character. I moved a lot. It's a thing everybody does when you adjust to a new place.
Did you also have friends that shared your views?
Again, not a lot of people I think that really critically looked at them. So I mean,
so you felt like a loner?
Discussions. Yeah,
in terms of your views of that way.
In terms of my views, because I was the only person I thought at that time that was really critically trying to look
You
at
probably
stuff.
had a lot of friends. Is this high school years?
Yeah, these are high school years.
And then some of college?
Late high school, first 2 years of community
so
college.
you got a lot of people who are like Christian.
Right.
But even that's a spectrum, right? Because
exactly.
some are really conservative, some are not very reflective and
right.
pretty, maybe morally not living that much different.
And I went to a charter school there, totally public charter school, but it mostly was a lot of kids who kind of stood out. It just ended up it was going to be a regular school, and then eventually it was a lot of the kids who stood out the other schools ended up coming here.
Yeah.
So it was like I didn't have the like the quote unquote Texas stereotypical environment around.
Yeah.
That would have been at like the public high school.
Yeah.
And so I was able to be around people who kind of shared values that are closer to me. Even though I think most of the values of the people there and in the South are all the same, a lot of it just comes down to what you say you believe in.
So this is late. This has got to be like 2015 to 2020 time frame when you're in.
This was 2019. I graduated in 21, and then I spent 2 years in community college there, and I ended up going to Jersey in 23.
All right. So philosophy. So was YouTube or TikTok part of this journey?
Oh yeah, it was YouTube Atheist, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens.
Yeah.
That's kind of the loophole I think a lot of people find themselves getting into this stuff with.
Okay.
And Christopher Hitchens was funny.
Like in 2020, he was passed away, no, by then?
Oh, yeah.
I was going to say
He's
it was
definitely passed away.
way back in 20... I can't remember exactly when. I want to say 2012 or something.
Yeah, 11 or 12.
Yeah. So I used to be part of a group that helped stage debates, and with Dawkins and Hitchens.
Yeah, wonderful.
And in fact, I visited Yellowstone with Christopher Hitchens.
Oh, really?
For the first time and only time he ever went there, because he was already getting his cancer treatments.
Yeah.
And we watched Old Faithful blow and drove around Yellowstone.
Giving him some nudges, be like, that's pretty.
What do you think, Christopher?
Cool. Yeah.
How can you not believe in God now?
Exactly.
It's, like, that settles it, right?
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was a very interesting time with him. Spend some time with him. I'm not pretending that I know him any better than spending a weekend basically with him. Had to go to D.C. and pick him up on a flight because he could only fly private jets at that point.
Yeah.
And got to spend quite a bit of time with him, so it was nice. But again, I'm not pretending I was a close friend or anything.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's interesting that so that was a part of your journey then, kind of animating your desire to be educated, and Hitch played a role.
Yeah.
And his way, understandably, just a phenomenal writer, essayist.
Yeah. That's what attracted me first too. I love essayists. I like literary criticism.
Yeah.
And so he had really insightful points. He's one of those like writers who's like, it's okay to have an opinion, feel really strongly about something. Yeah. And I appreciated that.
And a contrarian.
Yeah, and a contrarian, very funny.
Two fellow atheists quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And very funny, very entertaining. And his brother Peter, it's kind of interesting I don't know if you follow his brother Peter, because he's a Christian,
right?
But you hear there's a lot of similarities between them.
And he just walked out on that podcast, Alex O'Connor, if you know him then too.
Yeah.
And I saw a video of Alex O'Connor where he breaks down some of Hitchens' arguments and shows they're a little bit more rhetorical than they are philosophically valid. That's not saying the other point, was telling the truth. I
have to be honest, I would feel like that's a charitable way to characterize Christopher. As much as I really liked him, I'm saying, honestly, he was not a trained philosopher.
No, I thought he was doing philosophy. And I thought those were real arguments, and they were things that people were talking about, like maybe philosophy of religion or something, or metaphysics. And it's not the way it worked at all. For most of them. I mean, there's solid ones, like moral arguments, again, problem of suffering and stuff. Those come up all the time. But he didn't approach
the Hitchens challenge.
Yeah.
You ever heard this? Yeah.
He didn't pose them in a really philosophical way, though, once they started dealing with that kind of material.
Yeah.
So I tried to abandon that.
He tried to convince me that he wasn't sure Socrates had existed while we were eating dinner.
Yeah,
and I was like,
trying to piss you off.
We're not on stage here, right? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
And he was like, I was like, well, okay. I mean, if you really want to have the discussion, I'm happy to talk about the multiple sources we have.
Yeah, that is a day one skepticism.
Yeah. But I really don't think he believed it. It was just his nature to explore ideas and play around and see what you thought and see if you had anything to offer.
Yeah.
It didn't suffer fools long in that sense. So it did play a role then before you kind of was, in a sense, would you have said like, oh, when I was a 10th grader in high school, like or 9th grade, was that Hitchens kind of exposure?
That was, but I'd always had convictions about religion before that.
And so you were already, I don't believe in God?
Yes, since I was 4 years old.
Okay, so very young you were, because I was very young when I was in I was forced to go to some Sunday school class thing that I didn't normally go to, and I was like, how do we even know God exists?
Exactly.
And I at least was in like 5th grade at that point. That's a little bit past 4 years old, though.
Yeah, I was brought to a Lutheran preschool. My grandmother requested that we go there. And they took us in, and there was, I kind of vaguely remember this, just a big crucifixion, Jesus weeping, and there's blood, there's crown of thorns, and I screamed and I cried and I ran out, and they're like, you see? I'm like, no, you're getting the wrong. That's the wrong interpretation from that.
Do you watch?
And ever since then.
Sorry, do you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a Larry David moment. Yeah.
So okay, so I got to get on to the interview.
Yeah.
So you had already a pretty clear view in one sense, and yet the new atheists were starting to shape it, and then you were like, okay, I'm going to do philosophy.
Yeah.
And did you ever move on during this time to like real atheology. Have you ever heard of these guys?
No, I
Or
haven't
people
heard
like Graham Oppy, or like professional philosophers who do traffic in at least discussions over theism, but they're not quite so performative as
militant,
Dawkins and
like the militant atheist.
yeah,
the
and
phrase I've
even
heard.
just performative, meaning that
Yeah.
they stage shows and
Yeah.
the debates were kind of a theater. Whereas there's a lot of debate that goes on. It has been for going back to the early Christian apologists. The debates.
But to answer your,
that was
your-
more serious.
yeah.
More studied.
To answer your question about that group, no, not really. I haven't really interacted with like any philosophical jargon that's like explicitly atheist, right? Well, part of the thing I'd say too is like there's an argument for atheism. It's the base assumption that I think you should make. But more in the vein of philosophical arguments for stuff like naturalism, what's the scientific process, that kind of stuff is more important, I'd say, than trying to defend something called atheism.
Yeah. And Alex O'Connor's, I guess, someone you've listened to some.
Yeah, he's fun. He makes things easy to digest and listen to. He's something that you can recommend.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, people like my father automatically just put a hand up and stay away from it. Something like that's really approachable.
He must be about your age, no? Or is he slightly older?
Slightly older.
Yeah. Okay. Because I perceive him as having been on a journey, and that he's certainly changed in some ways, which is totally would be surprising if you didn't, given he was pretty much a teenager when he started. But one of the things I've noticed, which is I think common for people who do philosophy, and it's not as common necessarily if you're outside of that, is a kind of humbling. What I call the great humbling. Because when you start reading the great thinkers on both sides, not the performers today, but the real thinkers across history that made arguments that, like whatever one thinks of Anselm's ontological argument, the general philosophical view, the view among professional philosophers is that Immanuel Kant, probably did the greatest damage to it. But that's 800 years of debate.
Yeah.
That means it was a pretty decent argument to start with.
Yeah.
And of course, there's still defenders of it.
Right.
And so when you get into that great conversation, it's usually quite humbling that, this isn't necessarily something we solve in 2 minutes always. No. And it does take a lot of reflection. And then you start to have to acquire the skills. And that is where the great humbling becomes, because it's so easy for a really good philosopher to turn you inside out in a seminar discussion or something. And if they're good, that's what they do to everybody. They all play the role of Socrates at some level.
If you spent time,
so is that, I'm asserting all this, but what I'm really trying to get at as a question, has that been your experience?
That it has been a humbling experience. Like I said, it was the this Alex O'Connor video where he called the sophistry of Christopher Hitchens, and I realized that these aren't really valid, nor are they sound. They're not proper arguments. Most of them are just appeals to emotion and stuff. It was the same thing on the other aisle.
To be sure. Which, by the way, we don't have to assume is always bad.
No.
But it's not philosophical.
But it's not philosophical. So if you want to talk about like rigor when it comes to truth, if you want to talk about argumentation, like what are valid reasons to or to not believe this, it's definitely humbling because it opens up a bag of monkeys. Like it's a black hole you like never get back out. Not like some kind of solipsistic way. That's maybe year one. I don't know. You hear something about Sartre and you're like, oh, maybe something's wrong.
Now I'm this.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then you start to see things a little bit differently. Yeah.
What's been, you think, the greatest like existential threat?
To me?
Yeah, and I don't mean a particular kind of threat. Just the sense where you're like, okay, I had a certain confidence about the way I was viewing things, and this is uncomfortably a challenge to me. And maybe it was just the strafing, the carpet bombing of Hitchens or something. I don't know, but
I've been looking for these moments all my life, and I think it's the religious qualities inside of me where I've been looking for a moment where it all comes crashing down, or it all comes building up, and I finally recognize it. And what I really liked about some literary figures.
Explain a little bit more. I did not track with what you just meant.
Yeah.
You find another way a little bit to say that.
Yeah, I thought that there would. I guess the problem is you could say in this term, like problem of revelation, I was always waiting for knowledge to truly impact me and change me in some kind of way and set me on a new journey. And as part of that,
Like know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
Correct, exactly. And that still never happened, and that's what I enjoy about the philosophical process.
So do you mean that the hard thing was realizing that's just probably not going to happen?
Yes.
Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, the ability to truly take things in stride. If I don't subscribe to a real idea of like absolute truth or something, I just have to kind of pragmatically admit that these things are useful for me as a human, and I have my environment, and I just have to do the best with them.
And I guess you were internally hoping or expecting. Do you think this was more of a moral or an intellectual, or could it not be parsed like that? Desire for this like revelation thing.
It wasn't a moral thing. I mean, I feel like I'm a pretty good person. Everyone says that, but
everybody who knows you says that.
Yeah, everyone who knows me says that too.
Maybe are you doing an interview after this? They're sitting. Oh, okay. They're sitting next to Chris, a friend of his. So I was hoping to be able to ask more about that. I'm just joking. All right, so go ahead. I know what you mean by that. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't really ever a moral problem. I don't think it ever impacted my sense of worth or like how people deal with different values in their life. Yeah. I think growing up American, I think that helps a lot. We live in a pretty cosmopolitan, a diverse, a pluralistic nation. And so it's easy to really see how conflicts can be mediated between totally disparate groups. I think probably for a European or something, might make more sense. Maybe from an intellectual point, from a moral point in America, I think a lot of people could take the idea of community in stride or a diverse community. Yeah. But it was more intellectual. It was I wanted to be sure about what I was knowing. I wanted to make sure I wasn't making a fool of myself was a big thing.
Fear of being stupid is very motivating.
That motivates a lot of philosophy people.
Motivates me.
So that was pretty much it,
Yeah, okay.
But no major existentialist. I was never really concerned with my existence, nothing like that. None of that stuff ever bothered me. I really like...
By bothered, I guess you mean, because obviously the very fact that we exist, I don't usually feel bothered by that because it's kind of nice.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Or even the threat of me not existing in like some kind of metaphysical way. I was like, all right, that's not going to change what I do tomorrow. And I really enjoy writers. I do like Nietzsche. That was one of the things that I didn't understand, like Hitchens, who wasn't making arguments that were probably philosophical that I liked, but he still has a lot of really insightful things to say about, the way we make value judgments and stuff. And writers like D.H. Lawrence, all these people talk about the sense of vitality, about the power of life and stuff. And when I absorbed that, it's like a deep breath, and it lets you put problems aside and bracket them and examine them without seeing every single one of them as like some kind of critical attack on like your worldview.
Yeah. I mean, I think because we're also like your human nature is a gravity that's so difficult to overcome.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like expecting a lion to, suddenly be a vegetarian. Like we have this nature. Regardless of its explanation, it just is there, our nature. And I myself think of us as it seems to me more likely than not that we also have a religious nature.
Yes.
And by religious, I don't mean that means God is real. I just mean just like we're moral.
Yeah.
Like we are going to make moral decisions, make moral judgments.
A big book that impacted me was John Dewey's Common Faith that I read in the last few years. And and then he makes that exact argument, and there's a difference between established religions and religious values, which people conjecture today, say stuff like, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. And I mean, they have no idea what that means. But I don't know what it means either. I
think they're trying to find a way to describe their feelings that seem religious in a way that's quasi-religious, but doesn't make you think that they're like Catholic or something.
Right.
And that's just the word they come up with.
I was just going to say that Dewey in this book, I think, makes it very clear which values are the strongest, connected between religious values and the values of all religions, and what we can do with this, particularly within a secular society. How can we be religious secularists? Yeah.
Have you done history alongside philosophy? So the reason I ask that is because my impression is there's a good bit of the philosophy is accounted for by the historical context.
That's exactly it. And that's, again, I found one of those groups, a lot of like the French intellectuals and stuff, France in the 70s, conjecture a lot, but a lot of their arguments might not be as secure as you want them to if you're not trying to imbue yourself in that world, in that nomenclature.
Yeah.
And so
I like the way you put that.
yeah,
that's good.
I recognized that. I'm sorry, your question was.
I blew that. I shouldn't have said anything, but I really like the way you said that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that everything's historically.
It's contextual at
has a
some
contextual
level. You can say, oh yeah, there's a reason Descartes
Yeah.
has this idea
Yes.
and goes through this experience that leads to the cogito,
Yes.
which is strictly from Augustine anyway. But anyway,
that's part of
but
that
there's a reason
French-
that happened then.
There's a part of that French
Yeah.
stuff that really emphasizes that.
Yeah, and of
Which
course
comes
the Reformation had happened. Like
Yeah.
if nothing else, like there was already a religious existential crisis going on.
Right.
This set the but that's another part of the great humbling.
Yes. Is the
is-
history, and that's part of the great humbling of philosophy too. Is you'll never have time to read everything that you want to, and it's hard to find
Yep.
out. Especially if you're going to school for it
Yep.
and you want to do something in academics. So like, all right, we got to devote your life to one or two people now, and you're like, I don't know
Yep.
how I can do that.
In your own philosophical setting,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be very difficult to, to remove the clothing of the now
Yeah.
from it, and for the most part, there's a level to which it's probably not possible to do that.
Right.
So that's a discouraging part of doing philosophy.
But yeah, I'm not trying to name drop here. I've done that quite a bit. And a lot of philosophy people do that too. I just meaning to say the way I interacted with history and I was never really interested in history, but intellectual history started to really interest me.
Yeah.
The movement of ideas. You realize that an argument isn't just an argument. That you've heard these before. They've been received, but they do change.
Yeah. I've been fascinated by, if I can just put a parentheses around the interview for a second, I've been really fascinated by the idea of belief, just in general. Mm-hmm. And not only in my own beliefs, but with Drew, the guy that I did the previous podcast with, called The Divide, because we've tried to perform an autopsy on each other so many times, and on ourselves. And it's truly like to try and understand why people believe something. Now, there's factual beliefs, heliocentrism or something, which are fairly easy in one sense. They're easier to account for.
Yeah.
But when you get to the deep personal, what we call personal beliefs, beliefs about fundamental reality, beliefs about a person, do I trust that person? It's a lot harder to account for trust. And in Greek, the word trust, belief, faith, confidence, they're all the same word most of the time. They're all from the root peeve. And, my trust for my wife is clearly not the exact same thing as my belief in heliocentrism.
Yeah.
But they are related. And yet, when you try to get into accounting for them, or accounting for my belief in God, it is not easy to do that. No. I'll try to say to people, you couldn't, if I offered you 500 million, I'll say, let's say I'm Elon, and I've got 20 billion, because he does actually have, I can give you 20 billion if you believe I'm a cat.
Yeah.
Like, actually believe it. It's like, oh yeah, like doesn't matter how much money you offer. I could pretend, I could do my best to act, but I wouldn't actually believe it.
Right.
And so I'm really fascinated by that idea in the philosophical world. As you know, knowledge, what we call knowledge, is like Stanford's Encyclopedia of Philosophy defines it as justified belief. Mm-hmm. It's warranted belief. And it's like, wait, what?
Yeah. Because like your intuition, at least with science or something, is that, the truth of mathematics, that has to stand aside from whether or not you believe it. It simply presents itself that way. Yeah.
Do you think of mathematics as immaterial?
I hate thinking about mathematics. That's why I do English and philosophy. I haven't done a single question in 2 semesters. I do all papers. I'm sorry, your question was again?
That was like the best answer ever. Why would I answer that question? I hate mathematics.
No, I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. I can't do it. But your question was about mathematics?
I was in engineering doing mathematics as a major before I switched to classics. Yeah, and yet since then, I love literature. Yeah. And I'm more on the aesthetic side. That's what it really motivates me and moves me. And but I still have this, compartment in me. Mm-hmm. So all I meant was that the way we perceive mathematics is that it's mind independent. It
Right.
seems like it's true kind of regardless. But that introduces the potential for a reality that's immaterial.
Yes.
And that might clash with.
That's an intuition that would scare me with mathematics.
So that would be an existential threat that I was asking about earlier.
Okay, yeah. Then.
Yeah, okay.
If you're talking about things like that kind of break up your Weldon Chung.
So generally, do you think, I think the universe is material strictly, or it's probably a mix of immaterial and material, or you don't have a view on the journey still?
That's a very good question. Metaphysics is kind of a hard thing to talk about because you got to continually clarify.
While you're thinking about that, do you know Josh Rasmussen, the philosopher from Baylor?
That sounds very familiar.
He stands out as being a Christian philosopher that is interacting a lot with atheist philosophers, and he has a pretty good reputation. We interviewed him for our other podcast. But he's got a pretty good reputation because he does philosophy truly on its own, for its own sake. And you don't, if you were a Christian, you could feel at times like he's threatening your Christianity by things he says. And if you were an atheist, you would feel like he's threatening your atheism or whatever. So that's why I say he kind of does philosophy for its own sake, I think. Or tries to. And of course, philosophers try to do that in general, but I'm just saying he's probably an interesting example of that. And in the camp of the that consciousness or something like it is probably the bottom of reality. Yeah. Mind is probably more likely fundamental than material. So that's why I was asking about him while you were thinking. Yeah. Do you have an answer?
Yes, if I have to say something positive to put it out there, I would say that the best explanations that we get for explaining things in the world are through only material means.
Yeah. And then when you get to like the hard problem of consciousness, your instinct then is going to be not because we clearly haven't resolved it. Your instinct is going to be probably along the way they'll come up with a material explanation that'll satisfy that.
Yes, I've got faith in that.
It's very. Were you trying to be cheeky?
Yeah, I was trying to be cheeky.
Good.
I was trying to be cheeky.
Yeah, that was great. I like that. No, it's good. It's because it's honest, right? It's a belief ultimately that you're trusting more that answer will come. But you recognize it's called the hard problem,
right?
Because we're not. This isn't 1850.
Yeah.
And
right. This isn't like Descartes. We're not talking about mind-body dualism, like a substance dualism, not metaphysics.
You know Philip Goff? He's in the social media atheist world.
I don't think
he's a consciousness philosopher of mind, and but he was on Joe Rogan. Yeah. And he was an atheist. Yeah. I know. I would think that too. But still, whatever. It's been the pinnacle of of being known in some way if you get on Joe Rogan. So he. And I know he was on there as an atheist, but anyway, he this last year he announced he had become a theist. Wow. But he said, "I have 35% confidence."
That's an interesting way to put your belief. Yeah.
He said, "I have 35% confidence in my theism, and I do believe that God must be limited because of evil. Yeah. That if God really was omnipotent, there wouldn't be evil." So so his announcement on Twitter that he had converted to theism was that, he said to Christianity, he said, "I would like to announce that I have converted to a heretical form of Christianity."
Yeah.
That was which was pretty, that's gold on Twitter. Yeah. Especially when you've already been on Joe Rogan telling everybody you're an atheist. Yeah. But philosophy of mind has been his area. Right. And I think that played a large role. That and just kind of like a search for meaning in general is what he said. It sort of started to nudge him to where he's prepared to live with the reality of God in this way. Yeah. That is Christian even, where he'll go to church, I think sometimes or occasionally, I can't remember. But he acknowledges it's heretical. He doesn't believe the whole thing. Yeah. And he puts it at 35% confidence of this belief, this commitment he has. And I thought that was so interesting, just the challenge to everybody. What does that mean? Yeah. And where am I now?
That's one thing that's bothered me a lot, especially when you're talking about getting historical perspectives for all these things, and I mentioned it about my program too is the idea of orthodoxy has always been like the main driver for me. The idea of doctrine and dogma, and how does shifting historical values come into conflict with what you're actually supposed to do?
Yeah.
Nobody lives remotely close to. I mean, no one knows what a true Christian really is.
Yeah.
But whatever it is, it's not whatever the we're doing today is what they were doing back in Jerusalem, back in Palestine. That conflict is always like motivated, I thought.
What do you think of it's common for Christians to say this, and Tom Holland, the historian, has written a book called Dominion a couple years ago, where he argued that even though he's agnostic, he's not a Christian, he argued that that the introduction of Christianity and Jesus' actual teachings really did create a moral revolution.
Yeah.
And his expertise historically is in the classical world outside of Christianity. He's not a Christian scholar or a scholar of Christianity. But he said that the average person just has no idea of the moral barbarism of the average Roman. Not in terms of that they had no conservative moral ethic at all, but that the way they looked at the sanctity of life, was so radically different from what Christianity introduced, which clearly is the Jewish Bible introduced through Christianity. That it really did legitimately create this BC AD phenomenon for the history of the world that the world doesn't recognize. Where do you see that as, to your understanding, persuasive or not necessarily?
I think it's true. I think you can't deny how the impact of Christianity, especially with our moral thought. But I don't know. Then again, you're a classicist. You might want to know that has more to do with Greek moral philosophy sometimes, or interpretations of Jesus in light of Greek philosophy by early church history, which is something that's been interesting me a lot lately.
There is overlap for sure among Greek philosophers, morally, ethically, with some Christian ideas, to be sure. And again, this is back to C.S. Lewis's argument about we don't find cultures where they celebrate theft, murder, betrayal, because it doesn't work. But it's also more than that. We just don't find them. People's instincts are towards some higher good that they define as generally loyalty and honesty and goodness in some way, even if it's morphed to their particular religious outlook, or they offer human sacrifices. It's not like they're literally sacrificing everyone. They still think in some way they're helping their community have better lives,
Right. But I think then, even when you put it that way, for me, it would only make the benefit of Christ something heuristic, something that merely happened to help people from a pragmatic kind of perspective. Because a lot of stuff in there, I mean, Jesus certainly helped. He's an amazing man, said a lot of amazing things, but his book has done a lot of harm. And so when people use that argument, that to me starts to sound like the tinges of what we're going through now, another Christian nationalist wave, where we start defining our culture and what's good only in terms of what we've received from Christ. We go, before Christ, there was no true moral civility. And if it was, then on the other hand, it's just merely heuristic. It's the Greeks had philosophy, they just stumbled upon it.
To me, that's why history is so valuable.
Yes.
And that's why I'm glad I did classics, because I can just say a lot to Christians that it's not true to think of atheists as having no morality. It's just naive. Not only because within your own Bible, it says that everybody was made in God's image, and that's what creates our character. So even on your own terms, we're moral because God made us moral, whether you're an atheist or not. But certainly it's ahistorical. The Greeks had very developed ethical systems, and Aristotle's in particular was not grounded in religion.
No,
it was purely philosophical and quite impressive.
It had a big resurgence.
And even to the point where some of there's an Aristotelian, as you said, resurgence, and some of the Aristotelians have started to have flirted with Aristotle's theism, because even though it wasn't a direct line between the two, they are somewhat related, at least teleologically. So there's been kind of a keep Aristotle away for a long, long time, for basically 5 centuries. And as people have softened toward Aristotle's ethics, which were impressive, some have softened toward his metaphysics. And there's a great article by William Stace. I'll try to remember to get it to you after this. because everybody who's listening to this podcast will think, "Oh, wow, this is." I'm so glad Bill's talking about this right now. Like, could we move on?
I am.
But at this point, it's just I can't resist to pass it on. But William Stace, 1950s. It's an article. It's an essay for the Atlantic Monthly. But he was a professional philosopher and taught philosophy. And his argument is that the modern age changed not as a result of the scientific revolution, that is a myth. That the common myth you hear is we grew up through science and we abandoned sort of the ancient religious sort of ideas and the classical ideas, and we're now the modern world. And he says this is a fiction. It's as much a myth as the other myths.
It might be for a few people who are writing essays at colleges, but that's not how it works for societies.
Yeah.
No.
His argument was that, yes, of course, the scientific revolution is very important historically in shifting the way people's paradigms worked. But his thing was that the death of Aristotle was the biggest factor, and it did not have to happen. The scientific revolution did not kill Aristotle. Something else did.
Descartes.
That's philosophical. Yeah. And he said it's very hard for people, even my fellow atheists, to admit this because they want to ride the tsunami of science because it makes them feel confident. If science is behind me, then I must be right philosophically.
Yes.
And he's like, well, actually, philosophy shifted. It dropped Aristotle's teleological view, but it didn't have to. And he says, actually, science more or less assumes an Aristotelian teleology, and yet, because it assumes that there's some predictability to the world.
Right. Yes.
And so he says, but it sits uncomfortably with it, and it wants to kill Aristotle, and yet assume he was basically right teleologically, but not about what teleology might imply about the universe. Yeah. And I love that article because it's one of those articles that I think is true, and it doesn't solve anything for any of these big questions, but it removes furniture out of the way. So you can say, okay, we've got a little room now, we can talk, about in a sort of philosophical way that I think you would enjoy. That's not where, just like Christians want to put everything on the Bible, and if you dare touch the Bible, they will defend everything about the Bible. Atheists tend to do this with science. Yeah. I'm standing on science, so if you dare start to push against something that is cherished to me, then that threatens my view. All right, I've forgotten what I was asking you. Anyway, because this is like a 10-minute detour. Your basic final question. I'll try and get to a final question. Your view of Jesus, you said earlier, was that he said some great things. Yeah. What's just kind of your overall impression of you say that, but I mean, do you have a more detailed, if you read the Gospels ever? It's okay if you haven't. I'm just asking if you.
Yes, I've read the Gospels, not carefully.
Or one of them.
Yes.
Yeah. Was that for school or just on your own?
Just on my own.
Yeah. Just to kind of see, because you got to at some point.
Because people talk about that guy all the time.
Yeah, you got to read primary sources at some point. Yeah. But what's your? Do you find it hard? My first question is, do you find it hard to separate that guy from what everybody says? Because I sometimes am like, I've read the Bible so long now that I feel like it's easier for me. Yeah. But it was very hard when I was 22.
Yes, it is very hard. I have been known to Jesus bash a little bit, but that's just for polemical purposes.
But do you feel like you're really just bashing the Jesus of what everybody says?
Yes, exactly.
Because that's just the way literature works. When you read the original stuff, you're like, it's not as easy as people think to.
It's hard to even really for me have a super strong opinion. Say anybody's really, really outstanding. Because they're all just people, especially a guy like Jesus. I mean, it's almost different than talking about Napoleon, a great figure.
I mean, he's clearly one of the. I mean, he's certainly arguably the most impactful human being in history.
And he was just a guy. He was just a Jew in Palestine who was saying things
even by the Gospels accounts.
Yes.
He came out of this little town in Nazareth, and everybody was like, "What?"
It's very, very difficult for people to think about that the same way that there's kind of a moment. Hopefully, if you're emotionally mature, you look at your parents one day and you recognize, this is just like a human being, and they have no idea what they're doing either. And it's like
when you have kids, they'll come to you really fast.
And for being in Roman Judea at that time, it's really amazing for somebody to even come up with. Not quite systematic, but a fully developed.
Particularly, I mean, if he had come out of Jerusalem as like Josephus, was quite a gifted writer. very gifted linguist and thinker and historian. Is the reason people still read Josephus. But he was an educated Jew in Jerusalem, where they learned Greek and Hebrew, and could speak Aramaic. And he was, he went on to live in Rome and dealt with emperors, and like he was part of the educated elite of Jerusalem. So it like makes sense we're still talking about him a little bit, Whereas with Jesus, particularly since he didn't write anything, and the bits that are preserved, it's common in critical scholarship, to view a bunch of this as invented. But I'm always like, well, I'm a little, just like on its face, I'm a little skeptical that a bunch of people who were basically know-nothings managed to create a figure that is that historically impactful. It's more likely that there was truly something spectacular about his impact. Whatever that is, it was spectacular. But I'm more interested in the impression you had, to the degree you remember it, of what stood out about like reading a gospel.
It was something that Kurt Vonnegut said too, and I've been thinking about this, especially coming from Texas. Now we've got the 10 Commandments mandatory have to be posted. Like, why is it always the 10 Commandments? The Beatitudes are beautiful. The Sermon on the Mount is like an incredible.
Yeah.
I don't argue this. We're not going to do the whole Jesus was like a communist, he was a socialist thing, just because he said not to be nice to people.
Yeah.
But
you just wiped out 75% of the country.
Yeah.
All right.
But I just thought that there was an incredible moral message about compassion in there. And compassion is, I think, when we talk about morals, what we're really doing is just talking about like the limits of compassion and what that means. And I think there's good evolutionary reasons for that, for people to band together. And as people start to be more self-reflective on their own culture, their own selves, we develop things like philosophy and language to be able to describe problems and not just things that are out there in the world.
Was there what things did he say or do? And I don't have to, you don't have to like quote a verse or something that you feel like left that impression.
He interacted with the poor. There was no class divide for Jesus.
Because he interacted with poor and rich.
Exactly.
When you say no class divide, it's not like he said, "Oh, the poor are always right."
Right. A lot of people take that "blessed are the meek" like that means to be like Nietzsche says that. He's like he's trying to raise like the weak and the broken. And I mean, in some senses that's true if you want to talk about is like a larger cultural thing. But for individuals, like, no, it's not just like losers or like becoming Christians. A lot of people take that message from Nietzsche. But
so some of it was him dealing with like not having a class divide and treating all human beings in some way on a standard.
And the other side of that coin is that he stood like in contradistinction to the rabbis at the time, to the institution of religion.
And politics.
And politics as well. He's a radical politician. He's a contrarian at the time. It's not fair to say that. Definitely not a socialist still.
And yet he was not, like his famous stuff is not that he led like a political movement at all.
No.
Even though he was accused of it.
Yes, and a lot of people use that in certain historical arguments and stuff, and like Jesus is just an insurgent and stuff, and that's strange to me. I think he was just a guy who happened to get a lot of things generally right in the same way. I know a lot of people, don't want to denigrate it either, but if there's a guy in the middle of Manhattan, he's got like tin cup or whatever, he's looking for things, he's talking about everybody needs to love each other, it's still not untrue. It's still incredibly powerful that somebody in that kind of position advocates for that.
I should say maybe it's not fair for me to say he didn't lead a political movement in one sense, because I mean in ancient Israel, Second Temple Judaism, obviously religion and politics were merged. I don't know if I'd say there's no difference, because within their politics, right, they had the Sadducees, which were far more political and more Greek enlightened, didn't believe in spirits and angels, and you had Herod, who was more or less Greek, who bought the monarchy. So Greek, his family converted to Judaism.
The John Dewey book we were talking about, he calls it the intellectual seat of authority, and that's what shifts. So maybe they're not inseparable, religion and politics, but what you presuppose for the entire way you're going to organize your life is the religion first. That's a better way to
I do mean. But I was going to say the other thing I would think, but I'm now pushing this on you, but I would think just that he was healing people. He's like, his miracles weren't I'm going to levitate the temple roof, which would be magical, but it wouldn't do anything for anybody.
Right.
So his name means salvation, and it's like, well, that's what he did. He delivered people from their troubles, And what about the whole stuff about the fact that all the Gospels, the whole focus is on that Passover festival where he dies for the sins of the world? Was that, did you, when you were reading that part, that element, and maybe you don't remember when you were reading it, so this may not be fair to ask, and your impression is more just a general impression, but was it like, oh, that's kind of an interesting twist on this story,
Yeah.
Even though you know it, I still find myself thinking it's quite a surprising ending, if you didn't never know it.
I think a lot of the way people often approach that and stuff, and you can look at this historically too, the development of Catholicism is kind of being the mainstay, and what most people would say when they think about Christianity has to be some offshoot of Catholicism. And then a lot of those morals, fall over into Protestantism.
Yeah.
I'm putting Protestantism, Catholicism in one thing, and Greek Orthodoxy in another, which is to say that there's an over-focus on the crucifixion and the death of Jesus and his suffering in the Gospels.
Like they over-focus on it?
I guess I'm talking about the reception.
In some of their books, it's a third, I think in Mark, it's about a third of the book.
Yeah, but I think this has been the main focus and the driving, at least symbol, that's pushed a lot of people towards Christianity.
Plato also focused on the Socrates' death in some
But the
way.
beautiful thing about Jesus is that he comes back and that there's a celebration of life. Unfortunately, someone decided to write Revelations after that and kind of take away all the new beautiful spring and coming out. D.H. Lawrence wrote a beautiful book.
Well, he is alive in Revelation.
Yeah, this is true.
And the end is, if you only just read the final 2 chapters, you would think, this is lovely.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, by the way, the Revelation, I always point out to people, because it's a book of judgments, I always point out the first 3 chapters are Jesus walking among churches, judging churches.
Yeah.
And it's severe.
Yeah.
So anyway.
But all I was saying is,
just for balance.
In that Lawrence book, it's really interesting. It's called The Escaped Cock was the original title, but then it was published as The Man Who Died. And he never says it, which is probably why the book wasn't released until after he was dead. It's this alternative story of Jesus coming out of the tomb. They took him down too early, like the explanation. So he just comes out and he affirms this life instead. He says, I've created this, and obviously this isn't, like we just said, this is like the reception of Christianity, not what Christ said himself. Again, a figure like Lawrence and Nietzsche both really advocated for Christ as a moral figure and a great man. But he comes back and he recognizes one of the things he focuses on is the sacrament. He's like, they're eating my dead body, and I've given them my death and suffering, and I've told them to motivate themselves through that. The great thing about Greek Orthodoxy, too, is the focus is always on the resurrection. I think more often than not, at least from my experience, is watching.
If you go back to the Greek fathers, right, it's clearly still the traditional, there's a huge amount of emphasis on both the death and resurrection.
Yes.
But and the Gospels do, so it's not surprising. Or the epistles, pretty much it's central.
But there's this beautiful view of imagining Jesus Christ coming back and really accepting life and accepting things like sex. He has sex in the book was a thing that people really didn't want to touch.
Yeah.
Him embracing.
But isn't that reimagining wasn't anybody's view back then? Certainly not in the Gospels.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. It's a reimagining, just like you could reimagine a Roman general as a very pro-democratic gladiatorial guy.
Yeah.
I'm just going to make up that story.
We're spreading the peace of
Rome. And it could be an
an
Oscar winner one day. You know.
But I think it's a beautiful way to interpret Jesus again, like as a man, as somebody who's just a regular person. Way you finally view your parents as people who are just going through life for the first time. And if you don't have any metaphysical, theological baggage with that, I think it's a really powerful way to illustrate what Christianity could do versus what Christ could have done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have one final question I forgot that I wanted to ask earlier. What about guilt? How do you deal with guilt? Like when you're growing up, you feel guilty. You've done things wrong. Everybody has done something wrong. And then you become an adult and you do things wrong. It's different. One time, I can't remember, something happened to one of our washers, and I said my brother did it, and my mom, laid into him, and he got in big trouble. And I felt that was like my first moment of serious guilt. But I was a little kid. It wasn't so consequential. It's different when, like, I've raised kids, I have grandkids, and I've made some mistakes where you can't put the milk back into the bottle.
Yeah.
And so, how do you view guilt? Like, what do you do? Just practically, what do you do? Because obviously, it's a big part of the Christian story is answering guilt.
Right. Which I think the interesting thing about that story, it's like a Christ with no guilt. There's no need for salvation. He realizes, I've taught people that guilt is this...
The reimagining story, you mean?
Right.
Yeah.
This is this fundamental fallenness that we're all a part of. And so for me, I reflect on that. I go, well, I know I'm not... There's no metaphysical principle that says I'm a bad person. There's nothing I need saved from. I realize these are mistakes of my own, and I can kind of handle the... Maybe it's like a Aristotelian thing. It's a virtue ethics. It's maybe I don't have the right balance between... the habits I have in my life, maybe in a psychological way. I journal a lot.
This is the way you're approaching guilt is, I feel guilt, I feel moral guilt, but I'm going to try and look at that intuitive experience differently.
I find it just as like a...
And reimagine it, I guess, as something else.
I find it just a different kind of anxiety. Guilt is anxiety you have about your past, things that could have been, what you could have done. But those are pretty relevant to what you're doing.
Well, there's a difference there because... Like, I had all sorts of plans that didn't come to fruition, you know. And there's things I do actually regret that I didn't do. But that's very different from where I knowingly choose to do something that even at the time, forget religion, pre-religion, before I even, that I know was wrong, that damaged somebody.
Yes.
That's a very different kind of thing from that.
I think it would have to do with... your personal kind of psychological senses, like your phenomenological experience, like really it's how do you deal with yourself as it's happening.
There's so in that sense the idea of instead of thinking like it's a real thing that I have to be delivered from, I review it. My perception, I need to work psychologically to re-perceive what that experience is as something that doesn't require guilt.
Yes. Meditate.
Is that working?
Yeah, it does. It works for me. Luckily, I said, I don't know, I think I'm a good person, so I try.
Yeah, I was just thinking it's so, like it's hard to imagine not feeling guilt, but some guilt.
I don't feel guilt about myself. I feel guilt about actions, truly.
Towards someone else,
Towards someone else, Towards myself, even.
Okay. Yeah. I get what you mean by that. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Feelings of inadequacy, stuff like that, I think.
Yeah. Okay, great. Wow, great conversation.
Yeah.
I knew that this would just go all over the place when you told me you were a philosophy major. Really glad to have you here, Chris.
I'm really glad to speak with you.
Yeah.